My first love ripped my letter and said I was too ugly to date him. Guess who's begging for my attention now? I spent 3 weeks writing that letter to Dylan in sophomore year. 3 weeks choosing every single word perfectly. When I finally gave it to him after chemistry class, he read it right there in front of his friends. Then he started laughing. Are you serious right now? He held it up for everyone to see. Look at this. She actually thinks she has a chance with me. Then he ripped it, not just in half. He tore it into tiny pieces while his friends recorded everything. Maybe try again when you don't look like that, he said, throwing the pieces at my feet. This is embarrassing for both of us. I picked up every piece while people laughed. Dylan kept making jokes about it for months. He'd walk past me in the hallway and say things like, "Still waiting for that glow up," or, "Did you write any more love letters today?" His girlfriend Jenna thought it was hilarious. She'd pretend to hand me makeup samples. Maybe this will help. I transferred schools junior year. Not because of them, my family moved, but I was relieved to leave. 2 years later, I started college at the State University. I'd changed a lot. Got into running, figured out skincare, learned what actually looked good on me. Nothing dramatic, I just finally looked like myself. First day of economics class, guess who walked in? Dylan. He sat right behind me without recognizing me at first. Halfway through class, I heard him whisper to the guy next to him, "Who's that girl in front of us?" His friend said my name. Dylan went completely quiet. After class, he practically ran to catch up with me. "I can't believe it's you. You look incredible. Completely different." I just said thanks and kept walking. But Dylan wouldn't let it go. He started showing up everywhere. Outside my dorm, at the library, at the coffee shop where I studied. "Can we just talk?" I was young and stupid. I've grown up a lot since then. He'd bring me coffee, offer to carry my books, save seats for me in the dining hall. "I know I was terrible to you. Let me make it up to you." The thing was, I still had feelings for him. I hated that I did. But seeing him every day, having him actually pay attention to me, it was everything I'd wanted in high school. So I let him back in. Slowly. We started studying together. He was actually funny and smart when he wasn't being cruel. He'd apologize constantly for high school. I was so insecure back then. I only dated Jenna because everyone expected me to. I actually always thought you were interesting. Things were going well for about a month. Then other guys started noticing me too. This guy Brandon from my biology class asked me to get dinner. When I mentioned it to Dylan, just casually in conversation, his whole demeanor changed. "Brandon? That guy's a total player. You're not actually considering it, are you?" I said I hadn't decided yet. Dylan got weirdly intense. "After everything I've been doing to show you I've changed? And you're going to go out with some random guy?" I reminded him we weren't together. He said, "But I thought we were heading there. I've been putting in all this effort." That's when I realized nothing had actually changed. He didn't like me. He just couldn't stand that someone he'd rejected now had options. The next day, Brandon sat with me at lunch. Dylan appeared out of nowhere and inserted himself into our conversation. "Hey babe," he said to me, even though he'd never called me that before. He spent the entire lunch talking over Brandon, bringing up inside jokes we didn't have, touching my arm constantly. Brandon eventually excused himself. Dylan looked satisfied. "You're better off. That guy just wants one thing." This pattern continued with every guy who showed interest. Dylan would suddenly appear, act possessive, then lecture me afterward about how none of them were good enough for me. "I'm just looking out for you. You don't know guys like I do." When I confronted him about it, he got defensive. "I'm trying to protect you. These guys don't actually care about you." I asked him if he actually cared about me. He said, "Of course I do. I'm the only one who knew you before all this. I liked you for who you really are." So I asked him to describe who I really was. He couldn't answer. He just kept saying things like, "You know, you're sweet and smart and stuff." Generic things anyone could say. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed him something. A photo of the ripped letter pieces I'd kept. All these years, I'd held on to them, taped back together. "You didn't like who I really was. You made that very clear." Dylan's face changed. He went pale. Actually pale. Like all the blood drained out of his face at once. I watched him stare at my phone screen. At the image of those tiny pieces of paper I'd carefully taped back together into something readable. His mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Then he tried to laugh. This weird forced sound that didn't match his expression at all. His hand came up like he wanted to touch my arm, but stopped halfway. The words came out shaky when he finally spoke. Something about how we were just kids back then. How everyone does stupid things in high school. How it doesn't matter anymore. But his voice kept cracking on certain words. I put my phone back in my pocket and picked up my bag. Told him I needed to go. He said my name twice as I walked away, but I didn't turn around. Left him standing there in the middle of the dining hall with people moving around him to get to the food stations. The walk back to my dorm took maybe 5 minutes, but felt longer. My hands were shaking when I used my keycard to get into the building. Harper was sitting at her desk when I came in, headphones on, typing something on her laptop. She pulled them off the second she saw my face. Asked what happened before I even closed the door. I sat down on my bed and just started talking. Told her everything. About the letter in sophomore year. About Dylan reading it in front of everyone and ripping it up while his friends recorded. About the pieces on the floor and the months of jokes afterward. About Jenna pretending to give me makeup samples. About transferring schools and then seeing Dylan again in economics class. About how he'd been showing up everywhere, bringing me coffee, apologizing constantly. About the other guys he'd scared off and how possessive he got whenever anyone else paid attention to me. About asking him to describe who I really was and watching him fail completely. About showing him the photo just now and watching his face change. Harper's expression shifted from concerned to angry somewhere in the middle of my explanation. By the time I finished, she was standing up, pacing between our beds. She said his behavior sounded controlling. Said it was manipulative, not romantic. Said the fact that he couldn't describe me as a person, but claimed to care about who I really was, proved he was lying. She asked if I was okay, and I realized I actually was. Showing him that photo had felt like taking back something he'd stolen from me. My phone started buzzing before I even woke up the next morning. Text after text from Dylan. Can we talk? You're misunderstanding everything. I really do care about you. Please just let me explain. I deleted them without responding. More came during my morning classes. Between economics and biology, my phone buzzed 6 more times. I'm sorry if I upset you. This is all coming out wrong. Just give me 5 minutes to talk. I care about you so much. You have to believe me. Please respond. I turned my phone on silent and shoved it in my bag. After biology, I came out of the science building and there he was, leaning against the wall near the entrance like he'd been waiting. He straightened up when he saw me, took a step forward. I walked right past him without stopping. He called my name, but I kept going. The same thing happened after my psychology class. He was waiting outside the building. This time he tried to walk next to me, talking fast about how he needed to explain, how I was getting the wrong idea. I told him I wasn't interested in talking, and he finally stopped following me. But I could feel him watching as I walked away. It felt different now. Before, when he showed up everywhere, part of me had been flattered even though I knew I shouldn't be. Now it just felt wrong. Like I could finally see what he was actually doing instead of what I'd wanted to believe he was doing. Biology lab the next day involved working with microscopes and I kept messing up the focus. Couldn't get my brain to settle enough to see the cells properly. Brandon was my lab partner for the semester and he noticed. After we finished, he asked if everything was okay. Said I seemed distracted during the whole lab. The way he asked was nice. Not pushy or demanding, just genuinely checking in. I told him I had some stuff going on, but I was handling it. He nodded and said if I ever wanted to talk about anything he was around. Then he started telling me about his attempts to cook actual meals in his dorm. How he'd tried to make pasta last week and somehow burned it even though it was in water. How his roommate had banned him from using the hot plate after he set off the smoke alarm twice in 1 month. How he'd been surviving on sandwiches and whatever his mom sent in care packages. I found myself actually laughing at his stories. The way he told them was funny, making himself the joke without seeming like he was trying too hard. We talked for maybe 20 minutes outside the science building about classes and professors and the terrible dining hall food. It felt easy, normal, like talking to an actual person who wanted to know what I thought about things. Brandon was still talking when I saw Dylan coming toward us across the quad. His expression changed the second he spotted us together. Went from neutral to something cold and hard. He walked right up to us without slowing down, inserted himself directly into our conversation, started asking me questions about our economics assignment that was due next week. Specific questions about the reading and the problem sets. His whole body was angled toward me, blocking Brandon out. He touched my arm twice while talking, this possessive gesture that made my skin crawl. Brandon picked up on the weird energy immediately. His smile got more polite, more distant. He said he had to get to his next class and it was nice talking to me. Before he left, he pulled out his phone and asked for my number. Said we should study together sometime for the biology exam coming up. I gave it to him while Dylan stood there watching with his jaw tight. Brandon said he'd text me later and walked away. The second he was gone, Dylan's whole attitude changed. Looked satisfied, almost smug. Started telling me how Brandon was probably just trying to get with me, how guys like that only wanted one thing. I asked him what he meant by guys like that. He said players. Guys who hit on every girl in their classes. I pointed out that he didn't actually know Brandon at all. Dylan said he knew the type, that he was just looking out for me, that I didn't understand how guys operated. I waited until we were alone in the dining hall later that week. Dylan had been texting me constantly, and I'd been giving short responses. Nothing encouraging, but not completely shutting him down either. When he sat across from me with his lunch, I put my fork down and asked him directly. Why couldn't he handle me talking to other guys when we weren't even together? He immediately got defensive. Said he wasn't trying to control me. Said he was just trying to protect me. That these guys didn't actually care about me the way he did. I asked him how he knew what they cared about. He said because he was a guy, he knew how guys thought. I pointed out that he was describing exactly how he was acting. Showing up everywhere I went, trying to control who I talked to, acting possessive of my time and attention. And he couldn't even tell me who I actually was as a person. He started to argue, but I cut him off. Asked him again to describe me. Not how I looked now. Not generic things like sweet and smart, but actual things about my personality, my interests, what I cared about. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. Finally, he said I liked running. I asked him how he knew that. He said because I'd mentioned it. I asked him what else I liked, what I wanted to do after college, what kind of books I read, what made me laugh. He couldn't answer any of it, just kept saying he was getting to know me, that we were building something. I told him we weren't building anything. He was trying to possess something, and there was a difference. Over the next few days, Dylan tried a different approach. Started asking me questions about myself, what kind of movies I liked, what I did for fun, what I wanted to study. But the questions felt wrong somehow, like he was filling out a form instead of actually wanting to know me. He'd ask something and then barely listen to the answer before moving on to the next question. When I mentioned I'd gotten into running over the past 2 years, he immediately jumped in. Said he ran too. Said we should go running together sometime. I'd been running on the campus track for months and had never seen him there once. I told him that, and he said he usually ran early in the morning. Asked what my route was, how far I usually went. The questions felt like he was gathering information to use later, rather than actually connecting with me about something I enjoyed. He kept doing this with everything I mentioned. I said I liked reading psychology books, and he immediately claimed he'd always been interested in psychology too. I mentioned liking a specific coffee shop off campus, and he said that was his favorite place. Every single thing I shared, he tried to mirror back at me like that would make us compatible. It just made me tired. Harper found me in our dorm room that Friday afternoon staring at my homework without actually reading it. She asked if I wanted to go to something with her. Said there was a running club meeting that evening and she'd been thinking about checking it out. I didn't know Harper was interested in running, but she said she'd been wanting to try it and didn't want to go alone. The meeting was at 6 near the track. When we got there, about 15 people were stretching and talking in a loose group. A guy with a clipboard came over and introduced himself as Caleb. He was friendly, but not in that intense way Dylan was friendly. Just normal and welcoming. Asked if we were new, and when we said yes, he explained how the club worked. Different pace groups, different distance options, everyone went at their own level. No pressure to keep up with anyone else. We ended up in the beginner group doing a 3-mile loop around campus. Caleb ran with our group, making conversation easy and encouraging when someone needed to slow down. He made jokes that were actually funny. Asked questions about classes and majors without it feeling like an interrogation. By the end, I was tired, but in a good way. Harper was breathing hard but smiling. Caleb told us we should come back next week. Said the club met 3 times a week and everyone was welcome. It felt good to be part of something that had nothing to do with Dylan or economics class or any of the complicated stuff happening in my life. I started going to running club regularly after that. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, Saturday mornings. Harper came to about half the sessions. I moved up to the intermediate group after a few weeks. Made friends with people who knew nothing about my high school experience or my situation with Dylan. They just knew me as someone who was getting better at running and made terrible puns during water breaks. Someone who showed up consistently and cheered when other people hit their goals. Caleb and I became actual friends. He was a junior studying engineering and talked about wanting to do a marathon someday. We'd run together sometimes and talk about random stuff. Classes and professors and weird campus traditions. He never asked about my dating life or made comments about how I looked. Just treated me like a regular person who happened to run at the same time he did. The running club people started inviting me to other stuff too. Study sessions at the library, pizza nights in someone's dorm, a group chat where people shared memes and complained about assignments. It felt like I was finally building the college experience I'd wanted, being seen for who I actually was instead of how I'd changed from high school. Nobody there knew about the letter or Dylan's rejection or any of it. I was just me. 3 weeks into running club, Dylan showed up. I was stretching with the intermediate group when I saw him walking toward the track in running clothes that looked brand new. Expensive shoes that hadn't been broken in yet. He spotted me and came right over. Said he'd decided to start running more seriously and heard about the club. Caleb came over to introduce himself and explain the different pace groups. Dylan said he'd run with the intermediate group. Caleb asked what his usual pace was, and Dylan gave some number that I knew was too fast based on everything I'd learned over the past few weeks. Caleb suggested starting with the beginners to get a feel for the group runs, but Dylan insisted he'd be fine. We started the 5-mile loop, and Dylan kept up for maybe the first mile. Then he started falling behind. His breathing got harsh and loud. By mile 2, he'd dropped back to the end of the group. Caleb stayed with him, slowing down to match his pace. By mile 3, Dylan was walking. He finished the loop, but it took him almost an hour. The rest of us had finished and were stretching when he finally came back. His face was red and he looked miserable. But the next Tuesday, he showed up again. Same thing happened. He struggled through the run, clearly hated every minute, but kept coming back. After the third session, one of the other regular members pulled me aside, asked if Dylan was okay, said his behavior seemed kind of obsessive, that it was obvious he didn't actually enjoy running but kept showing up anyway. I didn't know what to say. Another person mentioned that Dylan always positioned himself near me during stretches and water breaks, even though we barely talked, that he watched me more than he focused on his own running. The club members were starting to notice, and it made everything feel uncomfortable again. Like Dylan had found another way to insert himself into my life, even when I was actively trying to build something separate from him. The next Tuesday after running club, this girl from my economics class came up to me while I was getting water. Alicia. We'd done a group project together once, but never really talked beyond that. She looked uncomfortable, said she needed to tell me something. We sat on the bleachers, and she explained that she went to the same high school as Dylan and me, just a different friend group. She remembered what happened with the letter because everyone talked about it for weeks. She'd seen the videos people posted. Alicia asked if I was okay with Dylan being around me so much now. She said his behavior at running club seemed weird, that he watched me the whole time instead of focusing on his own workout. The concern in her voice made something click. I'd been so focused on whether Dylan had changed that I hadn't stepped back to see how strange his current actions were. Showing up everywhere I went, inserting himself into my conversations with other guys, now joining a club he clearly hated just to be near me. None of that was normal. None of that was healthy. I thanked Alicia for checking on me and told her I was going to handle it. That night, I texted Dylan to meet me at the library, told him we needed to talk. He showed up 15 minutes early, looking hopeful. We found an empty study room on the 3rd floor. I kept the door open, told him I appreciated his apologies for high school, that I believed he regretted what he did back then. But his current behavior showed he hadn't actually changed. He was still treating me like an object to possess rather than a person to know, following me around campus, sabotaging my interactions with other guys, joining activities he hated just to be near me. I needed him to leave me alone, completely. Dylan's face went from hopeful to confused to angry in about 10 seconds. He said I was being unfair, that he'd been nothing but nice to me for weeks, bringing me coffee, studying with me, apologizing constantly. I cut him off and said nice wasn't the same as respectful. That constantly inserting himself into my life when I'd asked for space wasn't kindness. It was control. He stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor, said I was going to regret this when I realized what I was giving up. That guys like Brandon didn't actually care about me, that I was making a huge mistake. Then he grabbed his bag and left. Didn't slam the door but walked fast enough that I could hear his footsteps echoing down the hallway for a while after. The next morning I woke up and checked my phone. No texts from Dylan. I walked to my biology class and he wasn't waiting outside the building. Went to the dining hall for lunch and he wasn't at any of the tables nearby. The absence felt strange at first because I'd gotten used to him being everywhere. But then I realized the strangeness was actually relief. My shoulders weren't tense. I wasn't scanning every room wondering when he'd appear. Around 2 that afternoon, Brandon texted asking if I wanted to grab coffee and study for the upcoming biology exam. I said yes. We met at the coffee shop on the edge of campus. Spent 3 hours going over cell processes and taking practice quizzes. Brandon asked what I thought about different theories we'd covered. Actually listened when I explained my answers. Didn't talk over me or try to show off. When I got something wrong on a practice question, he helped me figure out why instead of making me feel stupid. The conversation was easy. Comfortable. Like talking to someone who actually wanted to know what I thought. 2 days later, Harper and I were studying in our dorm room. She was working on a chemistry problem set. I was reading for my psychology class. Someone knocked on the door. Harper got up to answer it. Dylan was standing there. Said he needed to talk to me. Harper blocked the doorway with her body and told him that showing up without an invitation wasn't okay. That he needed to leave. Dylan tried to look past her at me. Started saying he just wanted 5 minutes. That I was being unreasonable. Harper's voice got harder. Told him if he didn't leave right now, she was calling the RA. He stood there for another few seconds like he was deciding whether to push it. Then he finally turned around and walked away. Harper shut the door and locked it. Asked if I was all right. I nodded. Told her thank you. She sat back down at her desk and said that's what roommates do. But I could tell she meant it as more than just a casual thing. She had my back completely. The next morning, I went to find our RA. Her name was posted on the bulletin board by the stairs. Room 101. I knocked and she opened the door. Asked if everything was okay. I explained the situation with Dylan. The constant showing up. The unwanted attention. Him coming to our dorm last night even after I'd set clear boundaries. I said I wasn't trying to get him in trouble. Just wanted a record in case things got worse. The RA took it seriously. Wrote everything down in a notebook. Said she'd add it to her incident log. Told me to let her know immediately if Dylan violated the boundaries I'd set again. That the residence hall had policies about harassment, and they'd enforce them if needed. Having official support made the whole thing feel less like I was overreacting. Someone in authority agreed that his behavior was a problem. Dylan didn't text me or show up outside my classes, but he found a different way to make his presence known. Started posting vague things on social media about how hard it was when people didn't appreciate genuine feelings. About giving someone a second chance and having them throw it away. About how some people would realize too late what they'd lost. A few people from our economics class reached out, asked what was going on between us, if I was okay. I didn't respond to most of the messages because I could tell some people just wanted gossip, but a couple of them seemed genuinely concerned. Alicia texted to check in. Another girl from our study group asked if Dylan was bothering me. It helped to know who actually cared versus who just wanted drama to talk about. Brandon and I started studying together regularly over the next 2 weeks. Met at the library or the coffee shop 3 or 4 times a week. He was majoring in environmental science. Talked about wanting to do conservation work after graduation, maybe work for a national park or an environmental nonprofit. His whole face changed when he talked about it. Got animated and excited. He asked about my goals, and I found myself opening up about wanting to study psychology, maybe work in counseling someday, help people figure out relationship dynamics and recognize unhealthy patterns. Brandon said that made sense given how I analyzed things in our biology discussions, that I had a way of breaking down complex ideas into understandable parts. It felt good to be seen for my actual interests and abilities, instead of just how I looked. At running club one Thursday, Caleb mentioned that a group was planning to run a local 5K race in 3 weeks. Asked if I wanted to join them. The idea of having a concrete goal to work toward sounded perfect. Something to focus on that had nothing to do with Dylan or relationships or any of that. Just me and the distance and getting better. I signed up that night. Started training more seriously. Added an extra run during the week. Pushed my pace a little harder. Found that when I was running, my mind cleared. All the complicated stuff faded, and it was just my feet hitting the pavement and my breath finding a rhythm. Dylan showed up at the track 2 days later while our group was training. Didn't join the run this time. Just stood by the fence watching. His presence made my skin feel tight, but I focused on my workout. Kept my pace steady. Caleb noticed Dylan standing there. Didn't make a big deal of it, but casually shifted where the group was running. Positioned people so I was surrounded by other runners instead of exposed on the outside. Kept close enough that I felt supported without making it obvious he was protecting me. After the run, Dylan was gone. But I appreciated what Caleb had done without him having to say anything about it. Brandon texted me 2 days later asking if I wanted to get dinner off campus on Friday. Not studying, just dinner. I stared at the message for a solid minute before Harper grabbed my phone and read it. She made me respond yes immediately before I could overthink it. Friday came and I changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a sweater that Harper said made me look like myself. Brandon picked me up outside my dorm at 6. We walked to this Italian place about 10 minutes from campus. Small tables with red checkered cloths, candles and wine bottles. He held the door open and we got seated near the window. The menu had about 20 pasta options and I couldn't decide. Brandon suggested we each pick something different and share. We ended up with mushroom ravioli and chicken parmesan. He asked what books I'd been reading lately, and I told him about this psychology book I'd found about attachment styles. He actually knew what I was talking about. Started asking questions about the different types and whether I thought people could change their patterns. We spent an hour just talking about that. Then he told me about this documentary he'd watched on ocean conservation and how plastic was destroying coral reefs. His whole face changed when he talked about it. Got excited and used his hands to explain things. I asked more questions because I liked seeing him that animated. The waiter brought our food and we kept talking while we ate. Shared bites of each dish. Brandon made me laugh with this story about his roommate trying to cook fish in their dorm microwave and setting off the fire alarm. We talked about music and what concerts we'd been to. About our families and what it was like growing up in different parts of the state. About professors we liked and classes that were harder than expected. He never once mentioned how I looked. Never acted like I was some prize he'd won. Just talked to me like a person he wanted to know. We stayed until the restaurant started closing. Walked back to campus slowly. He asked if I wanted to do this again, and I said yes before he even finished the question. 3 days later, I went to the campus coffee shop to study between classes. Ordered my usual vanilla latte and turned around to find a table. That's when I saw Jenna, Dylan's girlfriend from high school. She was sitting alone near the window with a textbook open. Our eyes met and she froze. I froze. For a second, I thought about leaving, but she stood up and walked over. Her hands were shaking a little. She asked if we could talk for a minute. I didn't really want to, but something about her face made me say, okay. We sat down at a corner table away from other people. She started apologizing. Said she'd been thinking about high school a lot lately. About how awful she'd been to me. She said she was insecure back then and followed Dylan's lead because she thought that's what she was supposed to do. That she knew it was wrong even while it was happening but didn't have the guts to stop. I didn't say anything. Just let her talk. She told me that after she and Dylan broke up junior year, she heard things. about how he treated other girls who liked him, made fun of them to his friends, used them for attention, then dropped them. She said it made her realize he had this pattern, that it wasn't actually about any of us. It was about him needing to feel powerful. She said she was really sorry and understood if I couldn't forgive her. I told her I appreciated her saying all that. We didn't hug or become friends or anything, but something shifted. Like this weight I'd been carrying around got a little lighter. Walking back to my dorm after that conversation, things clicked into place in my head. Dylan's cruelty wasn't because something was wrong with me. It was because something was wrong with how he treated people. He needed to make others feel small, so he could feel big. The letter ripping, the jokes, the mockery, none of it was actually about me being ugly or unworthy. It was about him being cruel. I'd spent years wondering what was wrong with me back then. Why I wasn't good enough for him. But there was nothing wrong with me. A sophomore girl writing a love letter was brave, not pathetic. Dylan was the one with the problem. He was the one who chose meanness over kindness. That realization made my chest feel less tight, made it easier to breathe. Economics class on Monday brought new problems. Professor Harris announced a group project worth 20% of our grade. We had to analyze local economic trends and present our findings. She assigned the groups randomly. Read off names from her roster. Mine came up with Dylan's. Also Alicia and 2 other students I barely knew. Dylan looked over at me when he heard the pairing. I kept my face blank. After class, our group met in the library to plan the project. I brought my notebook and laptop, focused on dividing up the research tasks. Dylan kept trying to catch my eye, kept suggesting we should meet outside of group time to work on our sections together. I redirected every time, told him we could share documents online and didn't need extra meetings. Alicia backed me up, said the whole group should stay coordinated through email. The other 2 students just wanted to get their parts done. We divided the work evenly, set deadlines for each section, scheduled our next meeting for the following week. Dylan tried to walk out with me after, but I left with Alicia instead. Our second group meeting happened in a study room on the 3rd floor. Everyone brought their research. We started putting together the presentation slides. Dylan made this comment about how much I'd changed since high school. Said I seemed way more confident now. Clearly thought he was complimenting me. Alicia didn't even look up from her laptop. She just said that I probably hadn't changed that much as a person, that he was just finally paying attention. The other 2 group members went really quiet, looked at their papers. Dylan's face turned red. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the meeting. We finished organizing our data and assigned who would present which sections. The whole thing took 90 minutes. Professional and focused. Dylan left first this time. Brandon and I kept seeing each other over the next few weeks. Dinner twice more at different restaurants, coffee between classes most days, a movie one weekend, study sessions that actually involved studying. He was consistent. Texted when he said he would, showed up on time, listened when I talked, asked follow-up questions that proved he'd been paying attention. I found myself thinking about him when we weren't together, looking forward to seeing him. One night we were at the library and I decided to tell him about Dylan, about high school and the letter and everything that had happened this semester. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked what I needed from him, if there was anything he should do differently or be aware of. I told him I just needed him to keep being himself. He smiled at that, said that was easy because he liked being himself around me. Race day for the 5K came on a Saturday morning in early November. Cold enough that I wore running tights and a long-sleeve shirt. The running club group met at the starting line at 7. About 50 other runners were registered. I stretched with everyone and tried not to think too hard about my pace goals. Harper showed up right before the start, brought coffee for after, and stood near the finish line. The starting gun went off and I focused on keeping steady, not starting too fast, breathing evenly, finding my rhythm. The route went through campus and around the nearby park. 3.1 miles total. My legs felt strong. I passed a few people in the 2nd mile, pushed harder in the 3rd, crossed the finish line and checked my watch. 28 minutes and 15 seconds. My best time ever. Harper was cheering and handed me water. Then I saw Brandon. He'd made this sign with my name on it in big letters. Drew little running shoes around the edges. He'd gotten up early on a Saturday to come support me. The running club group gathered after everyone finished. Caleb brought donuts. We sat on the grass and talked about our times and how the course felt. People were congratulating each other and making plans for the next race. I looked around at these friends I'd made, at Brandon sitting next to me, at Harper laughing with some of the other runners. This was what support actually looked like. People showing up, celebrating together. No drama or manipulation, just genuine care. Monday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Dylan. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won. He'd seen photos from the race on social media. Someone from Running Club had posted a group shot that included me and Brandon. Dylan wrote this long message about being happy I was moving on, said he wanted me to know he'd always care about me, that he hoped we could stay in touch, that maybe someday I'd understand what he'd been trying to do. The whole thing felt like he was trying to keep some door open. Like he wanted me to remember he existed and still thought about me. I read it twice. Felt nothing. No anger or hurt or confusion. Just this clear understanding that he was still trying to control the narrative. Still trying to have some kind of claim on me. I opened my phone settings and blocked his number. Then blocked him on every social media platform I had. Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, everything. Deleted the long message without responding. Harper came back to our dorm an hour later and I told her what I'd done. She literally high-fived me. We celebrated with ice cream from the dining hall and put on this terrible reality show we both loved. She said she was proud of how I'd handled everything with Dylan. That watching me set boundaries had made her think about her own life. About times she'd let people push past her limits because she didn't want to make things awkward. She said I'd inspired her to be better at saying no. We stayed up late talking about relationships and friendship and figuring out who we wanted to be. About how college was supposed to be about finding yourself, not losing yourself to make someone else comfortable. The economics group project presentation happened the following Thursday. We'd practiced twice as a group. Everyone knew their sections. The presentation went smoothly. Our data was solid and we'd made clear slides. Professor Harris asked a few questions after and we answered them well. Got an A- as a group. After class ended, Dylan caught up with me in the hallway. Asked if we could talk privately for a minute. I stayed in the open hallway where other students were walking past. He said he understood I was with Brandon now. That he got it. But he hoped eventually we could be friends. That we had history together and he didn't want to lose that completely. I looked at him clearly. Told him I didn't want friendship with him. That he needed to fully respect my boundaries going forward. No more messages. No more trying to talk. No more anything. He started to argue, but I walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't second guess myself. Just left him standing there and went to meet Brandon for lunch. Brandon was waiting outside the dining hall like we'd planned. He smiled when he saw me and asked if I was okay. I told him I'd just had to set some final boundaries with Dylan. He nodded and said he was glad I did what I needed to do. We grabbed food and sat at a table near the windows. The conversation flowed easily like it always did with him. Over the next few days, I noticed something strange. Dylan wasn't outside my classes anymore. He wasn't at the coffee shop when I studied there. He didn't text or try to approach me in the halls. The constant presence that had been following me around campus for weeks just stopped. I could walk to class without scanning the crowd for his face. I could study in the library without wondering when he'd show up. The relief felt physical, like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd been using just managing his behavior and trying to avoid confrontations. Now that energy went back to me. My grades improved. I slept better. I laughed more with my friends. Brandon and I met up after his biology lab one afternoon and walked around campus. He asked if I wanted to talk about what we were doing, relationship-wise. I appreciated that he brought it up directly, instead of leaving things unclear. We sat on a bench near the student center and he said he really liked spending time with me. He wanted to know if I felt the same way. I told him I did. He asked if I wanted to be exclusive, to actually be together as a couple. I said yes without hesitation. He grinned and took my hand. The conversation felt easy and mutual. Nobody was pushing or demanding or acting like they owned my time. We both wanted the same thing. Brandon mentioned that he liked how we'd become friends first before dating. He said he felt like he actually knew who I was as a person, not just what I looked like or what he wanted me to be. That meant everything to me. A few days later, I was studying in the library for my psychology midterm. I had my notes spread across the table and was reviewing theories about interpersonal dynamics. My mind wandered and I found myself thinking about that letter I wrote to Dylan back in sophomore year. I remembered sitting at my desk for hours, choosing each word carefully. I'd poured so much hope and vulnerability onto those pages. I'd imagined him reading it and realizing he felt the same way. Instead, he'd ripped it up in front of everyone and spent months mocking me for it. The memory used to make my stomach hurt. But sitting there in the library, I felt something different. Gratitude. If Dylan had said yes back then, if he'd dated me in high school, I would have wasted years on someone who didn't see my worth. I would have accepted terrible treatment because I didn't know any better. His rejection, as cruel as it was, had saved me from that. I'd learned what I didn't want. Now I knew what I did want, and I had it with Brandon. Harper came back to our dorm that evening excited about something. She'd seen a flyer for a campus therapy workshop about healthy relationships and boundaries. She asked if I wanted to go with her. I said sure, figuring it might be useful. The workshop was actually really good. The counselor talked about recognizing red flags in relationships. Things like love bombing, possessive behavior, manipulation disguised as care. I kept thinking about Dylan and how he'd checked so many of those boxes. The counselor also talked about setting boundaries and communicating needs clearly. Harper and I both took notes and talked about it afterward. She said she'd let people push past her limits before because she didn't want things to be awkward. I told her I'd done the same thing. We both committed to being better at saying no when something didn't feel right. The experience with Dylan had been painful, but it taught me exactly what I didn't want in a relationship. It also helped me recognize what I did want. In economics class, Alicia and I started talking more. We'd been friendly during the group project, but now we actually hung out between classes. She mentioned her friend group was getting together for dinner off campus and asked if I wanted to come. I went and met about 6 of her friends. They were all easy to talk to, and we had good conversations about classes and campus life. Having more social connections made the university feel less small. I wasn't constantly worried about running into Dylan anymore because I had other people and other places to be. During one of our dinners, Alicia mentioned that Dylan had started pursuing some girl who lived in his dorm. She'd seen them together a lot recently. His behavior with this new girl was apparently the same as it had been with me. Intense, always around, very focused. Hearing that confirmed what I'd already known. Dylan's interest in me had never been about me specifically. It was about the chase, about not being able to have something he thought he should have. Any girl who gave him attention would have gotten the same treatment. A week later, Brandon came over to study, and Harper was there too. I'd been wanting them to actually meet and hang out rather than just passing each other in the hallway. They hit it off immediately. Harper made some joke about my terrible handwriting, and Brandon jumped in with his own story about how I'd written notes for him once, and he couldn't read half of them. They ganged up on me in the most affectionate way possible. We ordered pizza and studied together, all 3 of us helping each other with different subjects. After Brandon left, Harper told me she really liked him. She said he seemed genuinely kind, not just performing kindness to get something. She approved completely, which mattered to me more than I'd expected. My psychology midterm came back with an A written at the top. My professor had added a note saying my essay on interpersonal dynamics showed sophisticated understanding. She wanted to know if I'd considered pursuing counseling or therapy as a career. I sat in the campus center reading that note over and over. The whole experience with Dylan, as awful as it had been, had actually deepened my interest in psychology. I understood human behavior better now. I could recognize patterns and motivations. Sometimes the hardest experiences teach you the most valuable things, even when you never wanted the lesson. Running club met twice a week, and I'd become a regular member. Caleb announced one evening that a group was planning a weekend trail running trip about an hour away. Beautiful scenery, challenging terrain, different difficulty levels for different abilities. He asked who wanted to go. I immediately said yes. Brandon wasn't a runner, but when I told him about the trip, he was completely supportive. He helped me pack, made sure I had enough water and snacks, drove me to the meeting point early Saturday morning. The trail was gorgeous, winding through forests and along ridges. I kept up with the intermediate group the whole time. My legs burned and my lungs worked hard, but I felt strong. Caleb ran next to me for part of it and said I'd improved dramatically since joining the club. He'd watched me get faster and stronger over the past month. That pride I felt was different from anything Dylan had ever made me feel. This was about my own effort and consistency, not about someone else's approval. Walking across campus a few days later, I saw Dylan. He was with that girl Alicia had mentioned, the one from his dorm. They were walking together, and his body language was exactly like it had been with me. He stood too close. His hand kept touching her arm or her back. He talked constantly while she mostly listened. She looked flattered by the attention, but also slightly uncomfortable, like she wasn't quite sure what to do with all that intensity. I thought about warning her, walking up and pulling her aside to tell her about the patterns I'd seen, but I decided that wasn't my responsibility. She'd have to figure out Dylan's behavior on her own, just like I had. I hoped she'd recognize the red flags faster than I did. Brandon and I were studying together in the library when he asked me something. He wanted to know what made me finally agree to go out with him after turning him down initially. I thought about it for a minute before answering. I told him honestly that I'd needed time to recognize the difference between someone who wanted to possess me and someone who wanted to know me. Dylan had wanted me like a trophy, something to have and control. Brandon wanted to actually understand who I was as a person. That difference had taken me a while to see clearly. Brandon said he was glad I'd taken that time because now we were both sure about what we wanted. We weren't together because of convenience or because someone had pushed hard enough. We were together because we genuinely liked each other and wanted the same things from a relationship. That security felt better than any grand gesture or intense pursuit ever could. Harper knocked on my dorm room door 2 days later, holding her phone like it might explode. Some guy from her chemistry class had just asked her to get coffee and she didn't know what to say. We sat on my bed and I told her about the things I'd noticed with Brandon that felt different from Dylan. Brandon showed up when he said he would. He listened when I talked instead of waiting for his turn to speak. He asked questions about things I cared about and actually remembered my answers later. When I needed space to study or hang out with other friends, he didn't make me feel guilty about it. He never tried to control who I spent time with or what I did. Harper nodded along and said those things sounded really basic but also kind of rare. She decided to say yes to the coffee date. I felt excited for her the same way she'd been excited for me when Brandon and I started dating. The semester kept moving forward, and I realized one morning that I hadn't thought about Dylan in almost a week. When his name did cross my mind during economics class, it didn't come with that twisted up feeling anymore. No anger, no hurt, no wondering what if things had been different. He was just someone I used to know who taught me exactly what I didn't want in a relationship. That lesson had value even if learning it sucked at the time. Finals week hit campus like a storm. The library filled up with stressed students camped out at tables surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups. Brandon and I claimed a study room on the third floor and spent hours quizzing each other on our respective subjects. He was worried about his environmental science exam, the one that covered ecosystem management and conservation policy. But even stressed, he stayed funny and kind. He made jokes about becoming a forest hermit if he failed, then brought me snacks when I'd been studying too long without a break. I watched how he handled pressure and appreciated that he never took his stress out on other people. He stayed himself even when things got hard. My psychology final was scheduled for the second to last day of exams. I walked into that classroom feeling more prepared than I'd felt for any test in my life. The questions covered everything we'd studied about human behavior, relationship patterns, cognitive processes, and developmental psychology. I knew this material not just from the textbook, but from living through it. When I handed in my exam and walked out, I felt confident I'd aced it. The semester that started with Dylan reappearing in my life was ending with me stronger and clearer about my own worth. I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me as a person, not as someone to possess or control. Even the moments when I'd felt confused or uncertain had taught me something important about recognizing red flags and trusting my instincts. On the last day of classes, Alicia and I met at the campus coffee shop to celebrate surviving finals. She ordered some fancy latte and I got my usual black coffee. We talked about our plans for winter break and what classes we were taking next semester. Then she mentioned something almost casually, like she wasn't sure if I'd want to know. Dylan had dropped out of economics and switched all his classes to online for spring semester. Apparently, he found the campus environment uncomfortable now. I felt something when she said that. Not quite satisfaction, but definitely relief. More physical distance between us sounded perfect. Brandon and I exchanged gifts the day before we both left for winter break. Nothing expensive, just things that showed we actually paid attention to each other. He gave me a book by my favorite author, one I'd mentioned wanting to read during one of our study sessions. I gave him a trail map of conservation areas near campus that we could explore together next semester. We promised to text and video call regularly over the break. The goodbye hug lasted longer than usual but didn't feel sad, just like we'd miss each other until we saw each other again in a few weeks. My mom picked me up from campus, and the first thing she said after hello was that I looked different. Not physically different, just more settled in myself somehow. We stopped for lunch on the drive home, and I ended up telling her everything about Dylan. The letter, high school, college, how he'd acted, and then about Brandon. She listened without interrupting and asked good questions that showed she was really hearing me. When I finished, she said she was proud of how I'd handled a difficult situation with grace and clarity. That meant more to me than she probably realized. During winter break, I was unpacking boxes in my childhood bedroom when I found the container where I'd kept the taped-together letter pieces all these years. I took them out carefully and read through my teenage words. The handwriting looked so young and hopeful. I felt compassion for the girl who wrote that letter, for how brave she'd been to put her feelings out there even though it ended badly. But I didn't feel that crushing embarrassment anymore. Those words belonged to someone I used to be, and I'd grown into someone different now. I carried the pieces downstairs and threw them in the kitchen trash. My mom saw me do it and didn't ask questions, just squeezed my shoulder as she walked past. Brandon and I texted constantly throughout break. He sent me photos of his family's Christmas decorations and complained about his little sister stealing his phone. I sent him pictures of my mom's terrible attempts at baking cookies and updates about the books I was reading. We made plans for things we wanted to do next semester, places to eat and trails to hike when the weather got warmer. The distance felt easy because we trusted each other and communicated openly about everything. I realized that healthy relationships didn't need constant drama or intensity to be exciting. They could be steady and secure and still make you happy to check your phone every time it buzzed. Harper video called me from her family's house on New Year's Eve. Her coffee date had gone really well and she'd been talking to the guy every single day since then. They were planning to go out again as soon as they got back to campus. She was nervous but hopeful. That good kind of nervous where you're scared something might not work out because you actually care about it. I told her to trust her instincts and pay attention to how he made her feel. We laughed about how we'd both started the semester single and stressed and were ending it with promising new relationships and stronger friendships. She said this was way better than any New Year's resolution she could have made. I spent the rest of my break looking up psychology programs online and reading about different types of counseling careers. My experience with Dylan made me understand how easy it is to miss red flags when you want something badly enough. I wanted to help other people recognize those patterns before they got hurt. I made a list of classes I needed for my psychology major and started planning my schedule for spring semester. The career counseling office had information about graduate programs, and I saved several links to look at later. My mom noticed me researching at the kitchen table and asked what I was working on. I explained my interest in relationship counseling, and she said it made perfect sense given everything I'd learned this year. She reminded me that sometimes our worst experiences teach us the most important lessons. I felt excited about having a clear direction instead of just taking random classes. Brandon texted me a photo of a conservation project his family visited during their road trip, and I sent him pictures of the psychology books I'd been reading. We talked about how nice it was to have goals we cared about, and people who supported those goals. The last week of break went by quickly, and I packed my stuff to head back to campus. My mom hugged me goodbye and told me she was proud of the person I was becoming. I felt ready for spring semester in a way I hadn't felt ready for fall semester. Brandon picked me up from my dorm the day after we got back, and we went to the Italian restaurant off campus where we'd eaten before. We sat in the same booth and ordered pasta and talked for 3 hours straight. He told me about his family's trip and his little sister's new obsession with marine biology. I told him about my psychology research and my plans for next semester's classes. Everything felt easy and natural, like we'd been together much longer than a few months. He reached across the table and held my hand while we waited for dessert. We made plans to study together twice a week and to try the new hiking trail near campus when the weather got warmer. Walking back to campus after dinner, he put his arm around my shoulders and I leaned into him. This was what a healthy relationship felt like. No games, no jealousy, no need to prove anything. Just two people who liked each other and wanted to spend time together. The next week, I was walking to the library when I saw Jenna coming toward me on the sidewalk. We made eye contact and I thought about crossing to the other side, but she smiled and waved. We stopped and talked for a few minutes about our winter breaks and our class schedules. She mentioned she was dating someone new, a guy from her biology lab who was really kind to her. She seemed genuinely happy in a way she never had with Dylan. I told her about Brandon and my psychology major plans. The conversation wasn't deep or long, but it wasn't hostile either. We said goodbye and kept walking in opposite directions. It felt like growth for both of us. We'd never be close friends, but we didn't need to be enemies. Sometimes people change, and sometimes they just move past the versions of themselves that hurt each other. Running clubs started meeting again on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I showed up to the first practice and realized how much stronger I'd gotten over break from running at home. The 5-mile loop that had killed me last semester felt manageable now. Caleb ran next to me for part of the practice and mentioned there was a 10K race in April. He asked if I wanted to train for it with the group. I said yes immediately, excited to have a bigger goal to work toward. The 10K was 6.2 miles, longer than anything I'd done before. Caleb said we'd add distance gradually and build up endurance over the next 2 months. After practice, I told Brandon about the race, and he offered to bike alongside me during my long training runs on weekends. He said he'd bring water and snacks and keep me company. I felt grateful to have someone who supported my goals without making it about himself. Dylan would have found a way to make my running about him. Brandon just wanted to help me succeed at something I cared about. My psychology professor from last semester emailed me during the second week of classes. She asked if I could stop by her office hours because she wanted to discuss something. I went to her office nervous that maybe I'd done something wrong on my final exam. Instead, she told me my essay work had shown really deep understanding of the concepts, and she thought I'd be good at helping other students. She asked if I wanted to be a teaching assistant for her intro psychology course next year. I'd help run study sessions and grade assignments and answer student questions. I accepted right away, thrilled to have this chance to get experience in my field. She said she'd send me the paperwork to fill out, and we'd meet regularly to discuss the course material. Walking out of her office, I felt like my future was taking shape. I had a direction, support from professors, and opportunities opening up. This was so different from last semester when I'd felt lost and stuck dealing with Dylan's manipulation. Brandon came to my dorm room one evening in late February looking excited and nervous. He'd applied for a competitive summer internship with a conservation organization and just found out he got selected. The internship was 3 months long at a research station 4 hours away. He'd be doing fieldwork studying local wildlife populations. I was genuinely happy for him even though it meant we'd be apart all summer. We sat on my bed and talked honestly about doing long distance for those months. He said he'd have weekends off and could visit sometimes. I said I'd probably stay near campus and work, so I could visit him too. We both felt confident we could handle the distance because our relationship was secure. We trusted each other and communicated well. The separation would be hard but manageable. Brandon said he'd been worried about telling me, afraid I'd be upset about the time apart. I told him I'd never want him to give up opportunities because of me. That's not what people do when they actually care about each other. He kissed me and said he was lucky to have found someone who understood that. Harper's coffee date guy became her actual boyfriend sometime in February. His name was Michael and he was studying computer science. Harper brought him to game night at Alicia's apartment and he fit right into our group. Alicia had invited some people from running club, including Caleb and his girlfriend. Brandon came too. We ordered pizza and played card games and argued about movie trivia. Michael made Harper laugh constantly and treated her with obvious respect. I loved watching her be happy with someone who deserved her. Our friend group solidified over the next few weeks with regular dinners and study sessions. We'd meet at the dining hall or someone's apartment and just hang out. Caleb brought his guitar sometimes and we'd sing badly to old songs. This was what college was supposed to feel like all along. A community of people who supported each other and had fun together without drama or competition. I'd wasted so much time last semester dealing with Dylan's jealousy, when I could have been building these friendships. One afternoon in March, I was walking across the main quad when I saw Dylan in the distance. He was with a group of people I didn't recognize, probably from his dorm. I felt absolutely nothing seeing him there. No anger about high school, no hurt about how he'd acted last semester, no attraction or curiosity about his life now. He was just a person who existed in the same space as me sometimes. I realized that indifference was the real opposite of love, not hate. Hate still meant he had power over my feelings. Indifference meant he didn't matter anymore. He'd taught me important lessons about recognizing manipulation and knowing my worth, but those lessons belonged to me now. He was irrelevant to my actual life. I kept walking toward the library without changing my path or looking back. He no longer had any power over my emotions or my choices. I'd finally reached the place I'd been trying to get to all year. The 10K race was on a Saturday morning in late April. I'd trained for 8 weeks, gradually building up my distance and speed. Brandon had biked next to me during my long runs every weekend, bringing water bottles and energy bars. Harper and Caleb and Michael all came to watch the race. Alicia was running it too, in the group ahead of me. I felt nervous at the starting line, surrounded by hundreds of other runners. The gun went off and we started moving. The first 2 miles felt good, my breathing steady and my legs strong. Miles 3 and 4 were harder as my muscles started burning. Mile 5 was when I wanted to stop, but I pushed through, remembering all the training runs I'd finished. The last mile, I could see the finish line and hear people cheering. I crossed it with a time 2 minutes faster than my goal. Brandon was waiting right at the finish with a huge smile, holding a bottle of water. Harper and Caleb and Michael ran up cheering and hugging me. We took photos together and I felt overwhelmed with thanks for these people who'd become my chosen family. This was what real support looked like. People who showed up and cheered you on and celebrated your wins with genuine happiness. Not people who tried to control you or make your achievements about themselves. Spring semester ended in early May, and I packed up my dorm room thinking about how much had changed in 1 year. I'd come to college last fall carrying the weight of Dylan's rejection, still believing somehow that I wasn't good enough. I'd let him back into my life for a few weeks, confused by the attention I'd always wanted from him. Then I'd finally recognized my own worth enough to walk away from someone who only wanted to possess me, not know me. Now I was finishing sophomore year, thriving in every way. My grades were strong, especially in my psychology classes. I'd been accepted as a teaching assistant for next year. I had clear career goals and a path to reach them. I was training for bigger running goals with a group of supportive friends. Most importantly, I was in a healthy relationship with someone who truly saw me as a whole person, not just a reflection of how I looked or what I could do for him. Brandon respected my goals and my boundaries. He listened when I talked and remembered what I said. He made me laugh and supported my dreams and never tried to control who I spent time with or what I did. I looked at the photos on my wall from the 10K race and game nights and study sessions. These were my people now. This was my life. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Finally free from the girl who'd picked up those letter pieces off the floor while people laughed. That girl deserved so much better than Dylan ever gave her. And now she had it.